Hearty welcome to Jnanarjane Empowering Excellence. Friends, today Wednesday study circle, we have selected very interesting and apt topic for the day, taxation on digital economy, covering international taxation, equalization levy and TDS. To impart knowledge on this, we have an eminent chartered accountant having vast experience in direct tax and international taxation. He is none other than CA Pankil Sangvi is with us. On behalf of Bangalore branch and on behalf of all the participants here, hearty welcome to CA Sangvi. Hearty welcome, Sangvi.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And along with him, CA Ankit Jain also with us. Hearty welcome to Ankit Jain too.
Thank you.
Friends, this is a very interesting topic, and Bangalore is the digital capital of the world, I can say. And so we thought it appropriate to have this session today. So that's why the session we are organized, and the person who has excellent knowledge on this. Once again, hearty welcome to all the participants. You are the reason for this program. Your overwhelming support whenever we announce program, you register, participate actively. That makes us to organize more and more program. Hearty welcome to each one of you. I'll take a minute or two to inform you about some more upcoming programs in this month. Tomorrow we have another very interesting topic, mythology and internal audit. Mythology and internal audit is again an interesting topic. So CA Shivaram Subramaniam, audit head of Titan Group, is going to join, and he's going to impart knowledge on the topic internal audit and mythology. So I request all of you to register that program. Very interesting. And on 24th and 25th, the 2 days program, Women's CA Women's Conference. So it is meant for Women CAs, special program for CA Women's. So it is 2 days program, 4 to 7 p.m., 6 hours of learning. I request very interesting topics are assigned. So I request all the Women CAs to join this program. Friends, please inform your office, your colleagues, friends, and let them join and learn many things in that conference. And 28th, 30th, and 1st of October, 3 days workshop on valuation standards. 3 days workshop of 9 hours of learning from 28th, 30th, and 1st of October, 3 days. I request all of you to register that program. Again, a very interesting. It is a workshop. Detailed study is going to happen. So I request all of you to register that program. With that note, once again, hearty welcome to you. Over to Madhukeshwar to introduce our speaker.
Good evening, everyone. I am audible, right? Good evening, everyone. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the speaker of today's program. We have with us CA Pankil Sangvi. By qualification, he is a chartered accountant, and also he has masters in management studies in finance. He is a partner at BDO India with the tax and regulatory services. He has 17 years of professional experience with a focus on domestic tax, international tax, and transfer pricing engagements. He has contributed to several Indian business newspapers and professional magazines as well. He has also been a regular speaker at several local and national forums. He played a lead role in global transfer pricing documentation for major MNC groups. He argued complex and high-stakes tax and transfer pricing matters before the appellate tribunal. He has also authored a comprehensive chapter on taxation of startup in the tax compendium published by Chamber of Tax Consultants. With this brief introduction, I'd like to hand over the session to the speaker. Once again, a hearty welcome to you, sir. The session is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madhukeshwar, and thank you so much, Shetty sir, for your kind words. I hope everybody can hear me, see me properly. I guess in the dry run, at least it was working fine. Before we start, I would just like to take this opportunity to introduce my colleague who is also on the panel of speakers. Ankit Jain, he is a manager in our BDO Bangalore tax practice, and he has always been part of my team. He has been instrumental in preparation for this workshop, in terms of doing the research, preparing all the slides, discussing with me, and I have in fact requested him that there are some points which were his brainchild. So it's best if the person who has created it would impart that knowledge to you. So a few parts, in fact, Ankit, few slides Ankit would also be taking up. So with that brief introduction, I would like to straight jump into the topic. I'll share my.
Hearty welcome, Ankit.
Thank you, Shetty sir.
Okay. So friends, I do understand that a lot of our friends may not be into the international taxation field. A lot of us may be, a lot of us may not be. As Shetty sir mentioned, Bangalore is the digital hub. So yes, somewhere or the other, we are connected to the international world, to the world of online payments, online activity, services. So we are aware of what is happening, especially in the last 2 years after COVID came in. The online world has been accelerated, and accelerated to such an extent where it was unheard of. So I'll tell you one anecdote where earlier in our time we used to read those Archie comics, and in that actually there was a joke where it said that there were two parents talking, and they showed that in 2021, and interesting date, I am talking of in 1980s, when we used to read the comics as school kids. The date was 2021, where it was shown that the school children are going to take the school on a computer, and it was supposed to be a joke at that time. And so interestingly, 2021, it actually became a reality that all our children are going to school on a computer. It was just uncanny. So this is the reality of the situation. Other reality, we have heard of secondments, we have heard of online services. Today, the situation is that an employee sits in India and does employment for a US company. That it's not a service. It is actually, this gentleman is on the payroll of a US company, but is actually sitting in India and doing the entire employment. Now, this is the situation. This is what the digital world does to us. It transcends all the borders, it transcends countries. You can do anything, anywhere, for any person and any company. So there are so many different aspects of it. Your employer can be somewhere else. Your customer can be somewhere else. Somewhere else means I'm saying another country. Since taxation deals with jurisdictions, I'm just talking of countries. Your employees can be in a completely different country. Your server is in a different country. Your IT infrastructure is in a different country. Now, in this situation, the question is, who has the right to tax a particular stream of income? Everybody is grappling with it. And it's a simple example. Say there is an airline company. Now, airline in international tax has a different kind of taxation under Article 8. So this is just an example. It's not the reality, but an example. Let's say there is an airline company. An airline company has an agent in India. The customer is in Singapore. They are selling air tickets where the airplane is starting from some other fifth country. The airline is moving through at least 10 countries. The back office is in a completely remote country. The money is actually collected in a bank account in a completely different country digitally. Now, this is a live case where we have seen. So how the payment is flowing, the customer is paying the payment gateway is paying the bank account is coming into the company is paying the agent, and everybody is in a different country. Now, how will you tax it? This is the single largest problem. Now earlier, so let us go to this before we get into all this. Where is the- So I will just take us through. So as I said, a lot of friends may not be really very familiar with the international tax concept. So just a brief before we get into the slide. Just request you to look at me, then we will see the slide. Just a brief on international tax. There is no rocket science to it. Thus far, wherever you do business from, not from where you earn the money. That is called source. Source is from where you earn the money. No. Where do you do business from? So where is your place of business? Even if you are earning money from India, that was not relevant earlier. But where is your shop? Where are you sitting? And from where are you conducting your business? That is where the taxation was in the international community. To look at it technically, the words used are permanent establishment. This is typically a word used in the double tax avoidance agreement. Similar wordings are there in section 911, which is income deemed to accrue or arise of a foreign company in India. Section 911 says wherever there is a business connection of a foreign company in India, the income attributable to that business connection would be taxed in India. Now, what is business connection? Whether somebody has a business connection in India, whether any profit is attributable to that business connection, there are cases and cases and cases right from 1930s on all of that. But I'm just simply saying that if there, I'm just making it very simplistic. If there is a conduct of business from India, it was taxed in India. As simple as that. And till now, the meaning of conduct of business was there's something fixed in India. So let's go through the slide now, and we will not go through it in threadbare, but just to give you the concept. We are saying that if somebody does business through a permanent establishment in India under the DTA, this is just an example of the India US DTA. Different DTAs have different, but broadly all of them have the same language. So we've just taken US as an example. So if you see India US DTA, double tax avoidance agreement, in that we've said if somebody does business through a permanent establishment in India, then the foreign company will be liable to tax in India. Same way, vice versa, if an Indian company has a permanent establishment in USA, then that Indian company will be taxed. Now, say let's see where this word is, how this word is defined. It says, if you see Article 5(1), for the purposes of this convention, the term permanent establishment means a fixed place of business. See, I am supplying emphasis here. Fixed place of business through which the business of an enterprise is wholly or partly carried out. So at least there, number one, there has to be a place of business. It has to be fixed, and at least some part of the business has to be carried out through that. Now so again, everything goes to the place. Now let's see para 2 from A to say F. Place of management, branch, office, factory, workshop, mine, a warehouse, then going down farm, plantation, store, installation, building, construction site, services rendered in India. Point being that everything in the DTA points to something happening in India by way of a physical presence. This is always been the thrust of whatever. And then Article 7 talks about the attribution part of it. It says the profits of a contracting state, enterprise of a contracting state, means a company, foreign company, shall be taxable unless the enterprise in that state. So a US company will be taxed only in US unless that US company carries on business in India through a permanent establishment situated therein. So this is the law which says that you will be taxed only if there is a permanent establishment. Again, it goes to your physical presence. If the enterprise carries on business, the profit may be taxed only so much as is attributable to the permanent establishment. So again, whatever that permanent establishment, which is essentially physical presence, does in India, that will be taxed. Now, this is the international tax law. So everything is physical presence. Now, in this virtual world where merely downloading of information is my business is only downloading of information. Somebody is downloading information in India. Is it my place of business? Is it my fixed place of business? Can you say that I am doing business in India? Say, for example, I am rendering advertising services in India. So there is a Google, there is a X company who says that here is an ad on Google. Please put my ad on your website. So now Google has put somebody else's ad on a website. That website is flashed on servers in India. So you type Google, on the left side there is some big ad of say Microsoft new package or Apple whatever is flashing. Now Google's business is ad revenue. Ad revenue is one of the main streams of Google, right? Now, what is Google's place of business? Is it the office from where they do the coding, or is it the website on which people log on and do? Somebody may come and say Google's place of business is the website. If website is not there, the coding people sitting there are just coders. That is not where the business is happening. Business is happening on the website. So website is the place of business. That website has been opened in India by using the IP address of India. Using the IP address of India, somebody has opened the Google website. Can you say that Google is doing business in India? As per the current definitions of permanent establishment, answer is no. But in specie, is Google doing business in India? Absolutely. Google is earning ad revenues. Those ads are being shown in India. Why can you not say that Google is doing business in India? This is the problem. This is the crux of it. Are they doing business in India or not? If their business itself is a website, or airline company, the kiosk of the airline company is the place of business. If that kiosk is in India, they don't have any employees, no shop, no office in India. They only have a kiosk. Is that a place of business of the airline company or the agent in India? The answer is yes, absolutely. That is the business. Virtually on the kiosk, you can book a ticket. The business starts and concludes on the kiosk. That kiosk is sitting in India. Is it tax? Is it a place of business of the airline company or whatever booking agent in India? Answer is yes, absolutely. So now these things are falling through the cracks. Now, how do you ensure that these things don't fall through the cracks? This is where the whole problem came up. Everybody started grappling. And these are the now term. This is essentially what I said. We are just putting into English. This is the crux. This is the problem. The solutions are there. Nobody has been able to come up with a concrete solution thus far. Everybody is advising each other. Nobody knows the answer. Let me be very upfront with you. Everybody knows the issue. Everybody knows the problem. Everybody has the question. Nobody has the answer. So what are the different answers which have come up till date. And what is going to happen in the future is what we are going to discuss in this. There are a lot of things which have already been implemented, including by India. So obviously, that is going to be discussed. And then there are some things which are prescribed and are under discussion. But that is very relevant for us to see. Because even if you are not into the international taxation field, or say maybe GST dealing with international stuff, at the end of the day, everybody here are going to make some payment or the other online. You are going to use something online. Your company is going to use something online. You need to know what the foreign company, what your customer is getting taxed so that you can deduct the appropriate TDS, you can do the appropriate compliances. If suppose your client is in India and doing something vis-a-vis a foreign company without knowing what the foreign company is liable, your client can be, or say you, if you are in the corporate world as a participant, or if you are in the consulting field, either way, if you are in India and in domestic, where if you are dealing with somebody who is international, if that person does not do the appropriate compliance, you will be brought under the tax net as a representative assessee. So it is best if in every way, right from your TDS obligation until your representative assessee obligation, even if you don't have foreign clients or you are not a foreign company, it is best to understand it today. Because if you don't do it and some issue happens, ultimately your neck will be caught. This is what happened in Vodafone. Hutchison Max sold the company and went away. Vodafone was the person who paid the money, but still the entire taxes was on Vodafone's head. Now this arbitration and all these things are happening, but same thing happened to Kane and Vedanta, in case you are following the story. Whatever happens is whoever is in India, the Indian authorities is going to catch the neck. So it's best that everybody understands. Okay. So moving on. So this essentially, this is the verbiage. This is the English of what I just told you thus far. What are the challenges? Characterization of payment made in the context of new business models. So I am making some payment to a Google. Is it, what is that payment? Is it a business income? Is it a royalty? It is a FTS? Is it gross basis? Is it net basis? How do you characterize it? Because everything is digital now. Earlier it was digital. One digital payment people were fighting with each other, but everything else was, it was fine. There were no digital services. Today, each service is digital using of technology. So is that a royalty? Is that a license? Characterization. Second, whether the current rules to determine nexus with a jurisdiction are appropriate. Again, today nexus is established by way of a physical presence. Google's website, does it have nexus with India if it is doing business in India? In my view, answer is yes. But today, as the rules there, we saw the Article 5. As the rules stand today, the law of nexus is too much skewed towards physical presence, which doesn't work. How to attribute value created from generation of data through digital products? So today, just data, the website, the product, just the running of an application, creation of data, everything is business. As we said, Bangalore, there are so many people who just make apps and just collect data and just disseminate data. If somebody says, where is the physical presence? But why do you need a physical presence to do my business? Every second startup or every second tech company in Bangalore will come and say, why do I need physical presence for doing my business? And you ask us today, the last 2 years, everybody sitting at home, is business happening for the last 2 years? Answer is yes. Software companies in the last 2 years, maybe at least most of them or many of them, they have made more profits than we were thinking in COVID year, everybody will make loss. Software companies working from home, offices shut, have made more profit than they had made pre-COVID, which means business is happening. You don't need physical presence to do business. You are just generating data. How do you attribute value to what data is generated? Today's rules do not answer that question. So just a few thoughts, we just jotted it down. Some challenges: identifying remote sellers to ensure compliance with domestic rules. Today, you are saying that fine, Google has the website. Google's website is taxed in India. Google doesn't have an office in India. How will our revenue authorities go and catch Google saying that you please pay tax in India? Google is saying I have nothing to do with India. I'm sitting in the US. I'm not going to pay anything. I'm sorry if somebody is here from Google. Google is just a very glaring example. Everybody uses it. It's a household name. That's why I'm using Google. Google is not my client. So everything is in public domain. So whoever is, if somebody is from Google, it's just an example I'm taking because it's a household name. Determining the extent of activity. See, again, I said, even if identity and role of parties can be determined, it's impossible to ascertain the extent of sale or activities without information from the offshore seller. See, many times the assessing officer wants to know the information about what is your business, from where, what is your sales, are you really doing business or not. If somebody has to establish a permanent establishment or a business connection, lot of information is sought in assessment proceeding. But today, if there is no physical presence whatsoever, officer doesn't have any place to ask questions. So if there are no questions, then how will he establish that somebody has a place of business in India? It's impossible. Information collation and verification, that's self-explanatory. Identification of customers. See, there are a number of ways customers may identify the country of resident of its client, but it could be burdensome and would not work where customers are able to disguise. Today, we know of so many people where today they are accessing something from India, but their IP address is showing somewhere in an X country for whatever reason. Now, from our, so if suppose somebody says that if Google has a website on the Indian IP address, but if that IP address is artificially masked to be in France, the Indian authorities will never know that Google was doing business in India through that IP address. It is masked. Our tax officers are not IT experts. So now IT experts will have to come into the whole field of taxation in the tax office to catch these things, which is going to take its time. And these are the challenges. So I will now hand this over to Ankit, who will discuss some of the cases which have happened. Again, this is purely in the current Article 5, but obviously the digital world is not of today. Today it has accelerated. It is now going into very, very vast fields. But earlier also, the digital world was always there. So there are some cases which have been dealt with in the past, which we thought would be relevant from an Indian context, just to set this context. Yes, Ankit, over to you.
Thank you, Pankaj, and very good evening, August members present here. So, as Pankaj sir rightly introduced, that digital taxation is very much the future of Indian taxation system, and we have jotted down some of the historic case laws that is there in the digital taxation space that gives us some hint even before this equalization levy coming in, even before this significant economic presence coming in. There is the history of digital taxation being dealt by the Indian judiciary, and the first and the most important case law was the Andhra Pradesh High Court, where in the Visakhapatnam Port Trust, it was clearly held that permanent establishment, we understand permanent establishment as a fixed place of business. But in this case law, it was clearly held that even if the permanent establishment has a virtual presence or a virtual projection in India, then it can be treated as a permanent establishment. This was a remarkable and one of its kind case, which gave the concept of virtual presence or to be treated as a permanent establishment. Moving on, before equalization levy 1.0 coming on, there was a lot of disputes whether when the Indian company puts ads on Google, it will be taxable or it will not be taxable. At that time, Yahoo was also one of the very famous search engine where we used to put ads. So on that context, Kolkata Tax Tribunal had the opportunity to give a verdict in a Wright Florist case, where it was clearly and succinctly held that website cannot be construed as a permanent establishment. It can only be construed if your server is in India. If your server is outside India, it cannot be construed. And thus began the history of case law in Indian judiciary, where server and web hosting and this ad spaces in online digital world started coming in the judiciary. So coming on to the next case.
Let me interject here again, just to so as Ankit rightly said, the entire discussion was on the server. Now, server essentially, even though there are no people, but server is a huge physical body which is sitting in a country. So even if at the end of the day, it is not about where the company was, where the office of the company was, but at least server is a significant physical body. And still, so this was like a hybrid. It's not direct physical office of the company, but a server is not exactly just a web or an IP presence. A server is a brick and mortar proper presence in a country. So this was like an hybrid, wherein it was held that if a server is there, physical presence of server is a permanent establishment. So that was like the starting point, as Ankit rightly said, where people realize that an office is not required, a server is required, but that is still not a digital presence. I just thought I'll touch upon that. Yeah, go ahead, Ankit.
Yeah. Thanks for that clarification, Pankaj sir. So moving on, in one of the case with Google Ireland, it was very clearly held that putting the banner advertisement in the portal is in the nature of business profit. And since it is a business profit, it can only be taxable in India if it's PE in India. Now, since the Ireland server is held outside India, maybe in Ireland or maybe in some other country, but it is definitely not in India. So if it's not in India, we cannot attribute any profit to its business in India. And on that basis, Mobile Tax Tribunal has held that it will not be taxable in India. Moving
again, exactly same point. If it is not, if the server is not here, a digital presence is not a permanent establishment directly held by jurisprudence in India. So still, digital presence was not treated as taxable.
Yes. So moving on, then in Delhi Tax Tribunal, this same thing with a different angle came to the picture, where the Indian company had got a server space for web hosting, and that web hosting company was outside India. Now, the department said that it is a fees for technical service, but tax tribunal had said that providing of space is not a fees for technical service, because in fees for technical service there has to be an element of human intervention. But in case there was no human intervention, it was just automatic. And since that hosting where it is taking place is again outside India, so we cannot tax it under business profit as well. So in this Delhi Tax Tribunal case of Millennium Infocom, it was held that even when it is not a business profit, it is not a fees for technical service also. So now the taxpayer didn't have any option to tax any of such income for web hosting. Next slide, sir. And then there were a lot of disputes regarding this digital presence, PE presence of this. And so corporates decided best that it is better that we go to AAR before starting the business, and so that we can have a clarity or also. So in similar context in Areva TND, the AAR also, like we know that AAR is prone to giving judgments in favor of the revenue, but in this digital space, the AAR also has given the verdict that in case the computer servers are not in India, then there is no way that we can make it as a fixed place permanent establishment in India, and it will not be taxable. Same was happened in this Cargo Community Network PT Limited. Again, they went to AAR. This was a Singapore company, and they used to maintain, operate all those technology for landing of the flight, for taking off the flight, and all these things were maintained by their servers, which was outside India, in Singapore or Malaysia. Again, the AAR surprisingly gave the order here again that since whole equipment, everything is automatic, so it cannot be FTS, fees for technical services, and there is no PE in India as well. Yeah. So
So friends, so thanks, Ankit. I think this was very helpful. Friends, what is the message? The message which is coming out and which I mentioned earlier also is that while people were moving away from the brick and mortar office concept, the ARs as well as our tribunals and judicial authorities, but somewhere that mindset was also there that unless something physical touching the ground is there in India, even if it is just a server, unless something physical is there in India, a mere digital presence is not taxable in India. This is what is the crux coming out from all the different rulings. And if you see, it really makes sense to me. The authorities, the judicial authorities or the tribunal or the AR ultimately are governed by the law. They cannot make the law. They can only interpret the law. And what it means is the law today is very clear. Unless there isn't a specific clause to say that digital presence is taxed, today's law only you can tax only if there is a physical presence, some form of physical presence. This is the point. So there is a lacuna in the law. So Ankit, this I will take. Okay, so what has happened? So we have come to the conclusion that number one, there is a lacuna in the legislation. Number two, the courts and the judicial authorities have rightly interpreted the current law and have said that there is a lacuna to say that the digital presence is not a mere digital presence is not to be taxed. Now, whatever was there in India, exactly same story was there in every possible country. That mere digital presence cannot be taxed. Now everything is mere digital presence. So now somebody had to tax it. So now what happened? Now this discussion has been happening since 1998. I will not take us through the entire thing. We will go to February 2013, where OECD has taken over this issue about base erosion and profit shifting. So they said that people are doing their tax planning and they are using the law in such a way that artificially profit is shifted from presumably from a high tax jurisdiction to a low tax jurisdiction. If somebody has a 5% tax and if India has a 35% tax, I am going to shift my profit artificially by way of price manipulation, by way of some colorful devices from India to the 5% jurisdiction. So my overall group tax is minimized. So I can increase the loss in India, I can reduce the pricing in India, I can do whatever, all the different things. So one of those things, if you see October 2015, Ankit, can you see my cursor? Can you see my pointer, mouse pointer?
no, sir.
Okay, no problem. October 2015. So which is the second item in the bottom. It says BEPS Action Plan 1 report was issued to determine tax challenges of the digital economy. So everybody came, everybody sat, all these countries. So BEPS was done by G20, OECD, and United Nations. All the countries in that, they all came together and they have formed this BEPS guidelines, which included India. India was also a participant to BEPS, and a lot of inputs have come from India, and they have been appreciated as well. Because India was a pioneer. India always said that everybody takes away the tax from India. So India was the first person to come and say that yes, we will participate. So everybody sat together, everybody discussed what exactly we have been discussing, all the challenges, and then they came up with some action plan. That was called BEPS Action Plan 1. Just technically, if somebody says as a jargon, BEPS Action Plan 1 is in relation to the challenges of digital economy and how do you overcome it. So it is like a guideline. What should the countries do to overcome these challenges as a guidance? And if say for example today I come up with some unilateral action, if it doesn't have international blessing, the other country is going to retaliate, saying that, I mean, how can you put some law on my company, now I will put some law on your company. See how China did something, so US did something to Chinese companies and all of those, and it was a mess. Now, in a diplomacy, in a say multiple country, multilateral kind of arrangements, these things don't augur well, where the two countries are fighting and one levies some tax on. So that's why they said, let everybody come together and decide that yes, we will levy. So if you levy it, I will levy it. We should not fight. That is the whole idea of everybody coming together. So then there were all consultations, and then here in October 2020, if you see the top last rightmost item of the top, October 2020, it says reports, OECD reports on the blueprint of Pillar 1 and Pillar 2. Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 are the two things which OECD has now finally issued to overcome this. Again, issue means it is not a law, it is a guideline as to what countries can do, and if one country does, the other country will not start fighting because it is a cooperation. So I just thought I'll touch upon it. Now, what is this BEPS Action Plan 1? What did they discuss? As I said, this is not a law, this is a guideline of what to do. So base erosion refers to the corporate tax planning we just discussed. BEPS Action Plan recommended 3 interim measures. Now they've used the word interim. Interim means we are still discussing, but something to be done immediately because there is a lot of tax leakage happening. Or additional safeguards against BEPS, provided they respect the tax treaty obligation. So what they are saying is that double tax avoidance agreement has to be respected. So, but you do these measures in consortium. It should not violate some agreements under the double tax avoidance agreement while you implement these safeguard measures. So what are the 3 things? Create a taxable presence. This is the left side which I am reading. Create a taxable presence in a country when a non-resident enterprise has a SEP, which is significant economic presence. Physical presence is gone. I mean, it's not gone, but now we are talking about economic presence. Economic presence means from where do I make my money? Where do I do my business? Economic, by way of actual business conducted and earning the money, not where my physical presence is. That's not relevant in the SEP concept. Significant economic presence in a country on the basis of the following factors that are evidence of purposeful and sustained interaction with the economy. So it doesn't mean that somebody just shares some technology and it becomes a significant economic value. It has to be purposeful, sustained interaction with the economy, that country, via technology and other automated tools. So using technology, so Google, I'm just again coming back to the Google example. Google has significant sustained interaction with Indian people. So any money which Google earns through that interaction should be taxed in India, even if Google neither has an office in India nor it has a server in India. Nothing, no physical presence in India, still it should be taxed. What are those factors? Revenue based factors. If through that sustained interaction, Google earns a X amount of revenue from India, then it is significant economic presence. Digital factors. How much, how many subscribers, how many people have logged on to Google, how many hits, those are digital factors. Those also can be shown as significant and sustained economic presence. User based, how many people are using it? How many people use Google? So many. So many different factors are there to determine significant economic factors. They have said you can use any. So say for example, if in India everything is free, Google is free, right? Today. But if there are so many users of Google and they are seeing the ads, the ad money may not have come from India, but people from India are using the website. That itself is significant economic presence. Then look at the right side, digital services tax. So what we are saying is, let us not go to business connection, permanent establishment, significant economic presence. Let us go to the type of the transaction. That if today one transaction we know by default it is significant, it is big, then instead of going into significant economic presence, defining significant economic presence, saying okay, these many users, this much revenue, thresholds, all of that, forget all of this. If a foreign company does this activity in my country, X amount of tax on the total money which it receives, it has to pay. That's it. I don't have to establish the economic presence. I don't have to establish permanent establishment or business connection or nothing of that sort. If an X activity is done by a foreign company in India, it's taxed. That's it. End of discussion. So that is called equalization levy. I'm sure we would have heard a lot of this equalization levy. This is equalization levy. This comes out from the BEPS Action Plan 1, that if a foreign company does X activity in India, regardless of physical presence, server presence, whatever presence, significant economic presence, that amount is taxed in India. Now, this obviously it's very clear, right? It's the least complex, it's most simplistic. Nothing to be established. Indian system is most happy. Simple, no challenges, no questions asked. Equalization levy to be put. So this is equalization levy, which is a digital services tax. Straight, you render a service, you are taxed. That's it. No questions asked. Or a withholding tax. So this is the below. Withholding tax is nothing but TDS. Withholding tax can be imposed as a standalone gross basis final withholding on certain payments to be made for goods ordered online. Whatever you order, you pay the tax, you deduct TDS. Then whether the foreign company files the return in India, claims credit for the TDS, that's the foreign company's problem. Indian company, when it makes a payment, regardless of whether it is income in India or not, see section 195 today says if it is an income, it is to be taxed. Now this is a specific TDS provision which says income or no income. If this is the type of payment, you deduct the TDS. Then foreign company, if it is not an income, if it is not taxable, foreign company can file a return and claim a credit. But at least the money remains in India. Money is not going away. So foreign company has to now give the information, has to come into India, has to fight the case, and has to claim the credit of TDS. So this TDS again is another mechanism. So these are the three mechanisms which have been prescribed. So this is just a snapshot of what people have done across the world. Other different countries have done what they have done across the world to try to address this challenge of digital economy. Again, everybody has done their own thing. So say Austria has got some digital services tax of 5%. So they are saying what is the revenue? If you see the item down 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth item, it says revenue streams, online advertising. Anything to do with online advertising, 5% tax, and threshold is 25 million euro. So if I have 25 million euro and my worldwide revenue is 750 million euro, any online advertising payment made to a foreign company is taxed by Austria. Same way for Australia. Australia has levied GST on digital service. Again, same thing, 10%. See the revenue stream in scope. If you see 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth item down. Online sales of third-party goods, provision of digital service, provision of third-party content, provision of own content. Anything, if any of these services are rendered, 10% tax. Simple, no questions asked. Same way, Canada, same again, 9.97%. France has done 3% on revenue from sales and service. Italy has done 3% on so many things. If you see again, online advertising, online sales of third party, provision of digital service, third party content. So if any foreign company does any of this and meets the threshold 5.5 million euro, once that happens, straight 3% tax, no questions asked. So Singapore has done again indirect tax, GST. South Africa has done VAT. Spain again has done this same digital service tax on online advertising and digital services. Turkey, UK, again UK has done the same. If you see the revenue stream, advertising, sales, provision of digital service, third party content, user data. See, sale of user data, even that has been covered. Provision of own content, online sales of third party goods. Now, see, this is very critical because this is very similar to India. Just look at this. Now, what happens in a unilateral measure? As I told you, extraterritorial taxation. One country taxes, other country doesn't give a deduction. Huge problem, double tax, proper double tax. Shift in internally accepted principles of taxation, unilateral measures. So we have said revenue, you have to do a turnover in India, the profit in India. You look at physical presence in India, activity in India. This is no questions asked. You do this activity, you are taxed. That's it. Non-availability of credit in home. So if somebody taxed in India, typically what happens, there is a foreign tax credit. So if say a US company does business in India, they pay the money, they pay tax in India, that tax is allowed as a foreign tax credit when they file the US tax return. But this is a unilateral action. It is not part of the double tax avoidance agreement. No credit. Then there are additional compliances. So there is one live case on this for a Bangalore app maker, which Ankit is very familiar with. Ankit, you want to just touch upon this issue? It's a live case actually.
Yes, sure, Pankaj. So this will be very interesting for the participants as well. So we know this many startups are coming up on the making of the apps. So what they basically do is they make the app either in Android platform or in iOS platform, and they list that application in Google Play Store or iOS Play Store. So if you see the agreement between the Google and the app maker, suppose the app maker private limited is in India, in Bangalore, and they have listed an app, and that app has some inbuilt purchases, or when in order to download that app, you have to make some payment to download that app. So suppose 100 rupees is the per download charges for that app. So whenever you download Google, the agreement what they say is that Google will get the 100 rupees from me. Suppose I am the user, I am downloading the app from App Private Limited, and Google will deduct 100 rupees from me. Now, out of that 100 rupees, Google will keep 30% as a commission, 30%, 15%, that depends on the terms and conditions. Normally it's 30%. So 30% they keep as a commission, Google and Apple, and the remaining 70% they will pay back to the Bangalore App Maker Private Limited. So this is the thing which is happening, but there are a lot of challenges in this type of transaction. Firstly, this 30% deducted by Apple or Google, this constitutes a commission income. And since this is a commission income, and Google is a entity outside India, so we also have to see the TT obligation on it. Normally, commission does not have a withholding taxes, but yet your compliance obligation is not covered by this. So even if you suppose you are paying through credit card to a foreign entity, Form 15CA and CB is applicable. In the same way, here when you are getting the net amount after deduction of the commission, yet Form 15CA CB challenge will still be there, which may which the Indian company, the Bangalore App Maker, in our example, may get into trouble later on during the scrutiny assessment or so. So these things are happen. So as you can see that in this unilateral measures, these challenges arises. So
yeah, no, absolutely. So because of this, if somebody doesn't understand that if somebody has a there is a tax, but in this kind of a model, if there is no payment going to Google, how will you understand what is the amount to be given to Google if today Google is retaining and paying you back, but the tax is on payment today? The compliance obligation for the Indian company is not met, and it will be a huge problem because you will be treated as a representative assessor. So these are the challenges. If anybody does something unilateral, Google doesn't understand. Google will say, I don't care. Why should I do any? I will retain this and I will pay you whatever has to be paid. Then it's your problem. And then the Indian company will be in trouble because it is single-sided. So moving on, overriding international tax treaty framework. The double tax avoidance agreement is there for a reason. You are overriding that. May result into economic double taxation, which we mentioned. It is a double tax. Most countries have not provided for a central clause of transition rules once the global. So what we are saying is, I have done something, but you should say no. Okay, once the global consensus is there, then this will not be applicable. Nobody's saying that. They're saying global consensus, whatever is the additional tax will be there, and then what I have done also will be there, which is ridiculous. So what has India done? So when it comes to taxing, India is always the front runner, and I mean you can't blame India. So India has done everything. If you ask me, what has India done? Equalization levy. So there was a committee. All what happens. All of this, whatever we discussed, significant economic presence, withholding tax, equalization levy, everything was discussed by the committee. And ultimately, what they said, if you see the second bullet, first sub bullet, significant economic presence, it is not sufficient because the amendment of the treaty is not there. So, say for example, today in India, you bring a law under business connection to say that yes, apart from actual business connection, if there is a significant economic presence, you will still be taxed, and then you define what is significant economic presence, etc. But at the end of the day, as per the Income Tax Act, if there is a double tax avoidance agreement between India and that particular country where the foreign party is, the provisions of the double tax avoidance agreement always override the problems of the provisions of the Indian Income Tax Act. So the treaty, which is the double tax avoidance agreement, is always overrides the Income Tax Act. Now, if the double tax avoidance agreement, DTA or treaty, whatever what it's called in the international community, they call it tax treaty or DTA. So if that is not amended to bring in the same nexus of significant economic presence, a unilateral change in the Income Tax Act is meaningless because it will always be overridden by the DTA. So then nobody is going to look at the act. Then they said that significant economic presence doesn't work. Okay. Then you say, okay, let's look at TDS. TDS is fine, but at the end of the day, ultimate problem will be on the Indian party. Because see, let's say for example there is an Indian startup or an Indian company which is a medium-sized company. They are making a payment to Google. Google has a huge weight. Google will say, your country, your problem. I want my 100. If there is any other, if there is a TDS on that, you bear the TDS, you do your gross up and you pay your TDS on your own. For me, I am going to get 100, which is called a net of tax payment. So Google will throw its weight around, saying that I am a global giant, you are a medium-sized Indian company, you will do what I tell you to do. And this happens very regularly. The big IT companies, they always throw their weight on them. They say, we will not do anything. We want this money. Whatever is the tax in your country is your problem. So ultimately, the Indian party will be in trouble. The foreign company will not be taxed. So then we are saying equalization levy. Simplest, no nonsense, no DTA overriding, because it is actually outside the purview of the Income Tax Act. It is a completely separate act under the completely separate legislation under the Finance Bill. It is outside the Income Tax Act. So DTA does not apply. Income Tax Act is not relevant. No tax credits, etc., to be done for overseas. No TDS. Straight amount to be taken from the amount to be paid to Google. Indian party will just take that money and do it. Google cannot do anything. So this is a straight tax, no DTA, no TDS, nothing of that sort. This is the beauty of equalization levy, and that is why the Indian government decided equalization levy is the way to go. It is simplest, no nonsense, no questions asked. I'll not get into too much, but this is the crux of this slide. So given all of this, the Finance Act 2016, that Finance Act introduced equalization levy. Incidentally, India was the first country to unilaterally introduce equalization levy. So it is still unilateral. And it was under what? It is not under the Income Tax Act. It is under Section 164 of the Finance Act 2016. And it remains in the Finance Act.
Just like service tax was.
Exactly, just like service tax. Section 65 of the Finance Act of 94, yes. Same way, this is a Section 164 of the Finance Act 2016. It is not touching the Income Tax Act. So what was the payment? So we are saying if a foreign company earns X type of payment, that payment will be taxed in India as a equalization levy, no questions asked. So what was the type of payment? Online advertising, biggest problem, which is what we mentioned. Google is flashed in India. People using the Indian IP address log on to the Google website. They use the Google website. That Google website is not an Indian hosted website. It is an overseas website. People, but when you log on to Google, when you do the search, you do not pay any money to Google. Google doesn't charge you. The money which Google earns is the ad revenue. That ad revenue may not even go from India. For that matter, say for example, Microsoft has put an ad of a new Windows system on the Google website. Microsoft is a US company. US company has paid the ad revenue to Google, which is another US company. It will never ever be taxed in India. But now, if today somebody is making a payment, now this equalization levy as of now is India, so I am not saying it's outside, because it will be if it is US to US, it becomes very difficult. But this is the biggest problem. So now what is happening is any payment of ad revenue made by India to Google or to any of the online platforms which has ads, so OTT platforms and Netflix, any online platform, the Indian party will pay 6% equalization levy to the Indian government. It is not a TDS, it is a straight tax. So it is not that there is a TDS, the foreign company will then file the return, claim credit for the TDS, none of that. 6% done, that's it. Google has to do nothing in India. The tax is paid. This is it. So this is equalization levy. Very, very simple, very effective. No questions asked. And it is part of the BEPS itself. BEPS is, every country is part of BEPS, right? The OECD is there, UN is there, G20 is there, everybody is part of BEPS. Now, if I do equalization levy, nobody can ask me questions. It is part of BEPS action plan. We ourselves are saying that something like this. Now, how can you challenge me on this? Now, so this happened. Questions were not asked. Online payment, the payment was going well. So then our government got more confidence. And we said, let us take this to a next level and see where other are the gaps in taxation. Because yes, this was a gap, online ad. Where are the other gaps where tax is going because of this digital business? So there, let's, yeah. The second bullet, second part, second bullet, second sub bullet. A
Okay, so we
non-resident,
can see your cursor now.
a non-resident in following specified circumstances. Sale or advertising which targets a customer who is resident in India. Now see the difference. Earlier, this was made, this was paid by an Indian to, for online advertisement to non-resident, paid by Indian. Okay. Now see, this is sale of advertising which targets a customer who is resident in India. What does that mean? It means that when Microsoft US places an ad on Google US website, US company is making a payment to US. But ultimately, that ad is being seen by an Indian customer. And see what? Customer who is resident in India, who has access to the advertisement through the IP address located in India. So whether you are resident or not. So suppose there is a guy in Germany. That German guy has come to India. He logs on and he goes, obviously he will be routed through some Indian server. It will be on an Indian IP address. So that German guy is looking at an Indian IP address and logging on to Google and looking at a Microsoft US ad that is text. That is part of the equalization levy. So this is the ultimate in plugging digital economy leakage. Even if two foreign companies, one person is placing an ad, if an Indian company, even Indian customer is looking at that ad, that's it. The recipient of the ad revenue has to pay tax in India. So let's look at the verbiage. Equalization levy 2.0. 2.0 means that the second provision is levied on consideration received or receivable by non-resident e-commerce operator for e-commerce supply or services made or provided or facilitated. Okay, what do you mean by e-commerce supply or service? A person resident in India. So e-commerce supplied to a person resident in India. Non-resident in following circumstances. Sale of advertisement we discussed. Sale of data collated from a person who is resident in India. So nothing. Facebook sits in US, collates data from person resident in India. That's it. And then earns from sale of that data. That's it. That company is taxed in India. A person who buys goods or services using an IP address located in India. You are in India, you have an IP address in India, you buy a service, done. Whoever is the recipient, whoever he makes a payment to, that person is taxed. No questions asked. Rate of levy is 2% from e-commerce. Non-resident e-commerce. So what is not applicable? Non-resident e-commerce has a permanent establishment in India. All the scenarios where the equalization levy 1 is applicable. Sales turnover is less than 2 crores during the fiscal year. So is there sales turnover of the non-resident economic operator? So the non-resident e-commerce operator, if his sales is less than 2 crores in a year, then it will be exempt. Now see the issue. It says is required to be collected and paid by non-resident e-commerce operator. Shift from where the payer has to withhold. EL2 is not the obligation of the Indian person whatsoever. The equalization levy has to be paid directly by the non-resident operator. We are Indian. If that person fails, the person resident in India who is the recipient of the supply is regarded as rep possessee of the e-commerce operator. This is most critical. So even though ultimately we are leaving the tax is on the foreign company, if the Indian guy, if the foreign company doesn't do it, then I can become rep possessee. Indian guy will say, I am not required to withhold. I am not required to do any compliance. I am not required to pay anything. Now I have paid the entire money to Google for that. Now, how on earth can you tell me to, okay, if I have supposed to deduct the TDS and I have not deducted TDS and you catch my neck, I can understand. This guy has nothing to do with me. I am not even supposed to withhold the tax. If he doesn't pay, how can you catch my neck? It is impossible. So this is a huge problem. It's a huge fallacy in my view in this section, and it is very onerous on the payer. E-commerce operator. Now see the problem in the terms. Who is e-commerce operator? Now e-commerce operator, you would think it is Google, you would think it is not Google, Amazon, Flipkart. No, that is not what is e-commerce. E-commerce operator is what is defined as e-commerce operator, and what is defined. Sorry, I'm just keeping track of the time so that we can cover everything. So what is defined? E-commerce operator is a non-resident who owns, operates, or manages. So it is owns, operates, so it need not own. And even a manage. So somebody is just managing the platform. You need not own it all. A digital or electronic facility or platform for online sales of goods or online provision of service. What does that mean? It means that, say for example, I am owning and operating and I am getting money for online sale of goods or services. It doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be the middleman like Amazon. It is not necessary. If I sell goods online, I will be taxed. So let's take a simple example. Adobe Acrobat. Adobe Acrobat, you can buy online. The online version of it, you can buy the subscription online from the Adobe website itself and you pay the money. Now, the Adobe website, he is not an e-commerce player in what we understand as e-commerce, right? They are just selling their own goods from their own platform. Where is the question of somebody having an e-commerce platform or whatever? But no. The moment Adobe sells goods on its own website, and somebody from India is making a payment, Adobe has to pay equalization levy. No questions asked. That is what the law says. Then it says economic e-commerce supply of services, online sale of goods owned by e-commerce operator, online provision provided by e-commerce operator, online facilitated by e-commerce or combination, which is what we just discussed. All of this. Online means facility, right, benefit that is obtained, whatever. Now this is This is fine. It just so the finance bill has just expanded something which says acceptance of offer for sale, placing of purchase order, acceptance of purchase order, payment of consideration, supply. I mean, it's it's just, I don't know. They want to cover everything possible to say that this is sale, but I mean, anyway, either it's a sale or it's not. But that's my view. Then we are saying, what is consideration? Consideration for sale of goods, whether e-commerce own the goods or whether he renders the service, means again same thing. Again, extra clarification that whether I sell from my own website or I am just a middleman as a marketplace like an Amazon, everything is taxed. There are some exclusions where if something already qualifies as a royalty or a fees for technical services and is taxed as royalty, then this is exempt. Some issues which we just discussed. Definition of some terms are very wide and not defined. We just mentioned very ambiguous. Whether now this again, whether threshold of 2 crores is for the e-commerce operator or for the user or for the buyer, service recipient, nothing is mentioned. Whether this 2 crores is India or global, that also is not mentioned. Now, if say for example you take Google, Google will obviously global revenue will be more than 2 crores. So they should specify the 2 crores revenue from India. That's not specified. Should EL be computed on amounts including indirect tax, again GST? So it is inclusive, exclusive, not clarified. Whether EL paid in India can be claimed as credit in their home jurisdiction. This is one of the biggest problems because the tax credit is essentially part of the double tax avoidance agreement, which says that okay, the two countries have agreed that we will not have double tax. If the same income is taxed in two jurisdictions, one will there is will tax in one. Whatever tax is paid in one jurisdiction will be allowed as a credit in the other jurisdiction where the tax is paid on the same income. So there is a foreign tax credit in the country of residence. But here, this is outside the Income Tax Act. If it is outside the Income Tax Act, it is outside the whole entire coverage of double tax avoidance agreement, because double tax avoidance agreement specifically covers only income tax. So that is why smartly it has been left out of the Income Tax Act and only made part of the Finance Act, so that it is out of the double tax avoidance agreement altogether. And that is the reason why neither DTA overrides this, but the problem there will be that the foreign company will not get a credit in there. So there will be classic double taxation of the same income. Applicability on intra-group transactions, same problem. It's the same group entity, still will you apply? E-commerce supply resident using IP address. So this same thing we mentioned about Germany. A German guy coming into India using the IP address, what will happen? So there are some cases on equalization levy which I would request Ankit to take.
Yes. Thank you, Pankaj. So this equalization levy is very newly brought in, and there are lots of difficulties in deciphering what it is written and not. For example, there has been written a provision of service. Now they have not written rendering of service; they have written provision of service. And how can we? So even if suppose I book a hotel for outside India from an e-commerce website, suppose from Airbnb or from booking.com or whatever. But hotel service I will enjoy when I visit that country. So that country is where I am enjoying the service. But they have very clearly written provision of service and not rendering of service. So there are many cases like that which creates a lot of confusion in the minds of the taxpayer whether equalization levy will apply or not. We have put some case study in order to solve this problem. So the first one which you can see is so the e-commerce operator defined as per the equalization levy, that is owns, operates and manages a digital platform, and a buyer who is a resident in India buys the goods and seller is someone else. So buyer pays to the e-commerce operator 5,000 and of course, e-commerce operator will deduct their commission and pay the seller, suppose 4950. So the commission amount they have deducted. Now the question is, what is the consideration for charge of the equalization levy? So the e-commerce operator has to do the equalization levy at 1%. So whether it will be on 50 rupees, that is his income, or whether it will be on the full amount 5,000, or whether it will be on 4950. So this is the question. And so in this case, it has been from the reading of the equalization levy 2.0, it comes out that on full 5,000 e-commerce operator has to pay the equalization levy, because it has written the consideration received from the buyer. From the buyer, I am receiving 5,000 rupees, so I have to pay equalization levy on full 5,000 rupees. Pankaj sir, moving on to next case law. Yeah. So moving on, in this case law, what has happened is that the buyer places the order from the seller's website directly. For example, I have gone to like Pankaj sir gave the example, I've gone to adobe.com and I've placed the order for buying the Acrobat Reader. Okay, and seller, that is me, will give you some payment options, right? There will be a payment gateway options. I will not have the technology to imbibe the payment system. I will have a payment gateway, and from that I am getting the payment through the payment gateway page. Now payment gateway will also take some part of the amount as a commission. So here the question comes in, who is the e-commerce operator, whether it is the seller or the payment gateway? So here it is very simple, that seller will be treated as the e-commerce operator, because seller is the person who is managing, operating and owning that website where I went to and bought the software. So e-commerce operator will be the seller in this scenario. And not the payment gateway, because payment gateway and seller is having the transaction. We are just using the payment gateway. Pankaj sir, next case. So in this is also on the intra-group transactions. Like we said, there is a lot of anomaly. What will happen in the intra-group transactions? So suppose a parent company is outside India, and it runs an online portal, and that portal receives queries raised by employees on the group companies. An Indian company, being the subsidiary of that parent company, its employees also raises a query on that portal. Now portal is a HR portal type of thing. So suppose I raise a query that what will happen to the salary when I resign, or at what date will I get the extra amount of bonus which has been calculated. So all these queries, there is a HR portal, and portal responds to it. And this portal company is managed by a third party, and they are raising invoice on the parent company, and that parent company is charging it to the Indian company. That is, Indian company will reimburse that expense to the parent company. So whether in this scenario, whether parent company is a non-resident, will be the e-commerce operator or not? That is the question here. And so in this, we have to look at it at that who is the e-commerce operator? E-commerce operator is the owner, manager, and operator of the portal. In this case, the portal, the HR portal, whatever, is managed and operated by the parent company only, though it is not owned by the parent company. So the reimbursement which we will pay to by the Indian company to the parent company will still be treated and will be liable for equalization levy. So this is a very significant example, which we may think that equalization levy will not be applicable. Equalization levy is only applicable when there is an e-commerce transaction, and there is no e-commerce transaction in this. But the wordings of the equalization levy is not that simple, and this case also establishes it. Next slide, sir. Yeah. So moving on to the next case law. Here, what is happening is foreign company is providing services outside India. That is, suppose in Switzerland, and services are in relation to booking a Swiss rail. Okay, an Indian customer is going to visit Switzerland, and before visiting Switzerland, I booked a rail pass from the foreign company. Now there are 2-3 questions which comes here. Most important being whether foreign company can be treated as an e-commerce operator and will be liable for equalization levy for this or not. And because the tickets are booked online and contract is also concluded online and payment is also made online. So here the answer would not be that simple because the equalization levy 2.0 says online provision of service. So this service, so everything is online. I bought the ticket online, I booked the ticket online, I paid online. But the service of the rail pass, which I will enjoy, is I will enjoy it in by visiting Switzerland. That is in Switzerland and not in India. So the answer to this maybe yes and maybe no. Still, it is not very clear whether this will be covered under equalization levy or not. Yeah. Moving on. Yeah. So this is again after this amendment was made in 2021 to the equalization levy. So Indian company visits the website of a foreign company which is mainly into advertisement, and it makes payment for some advertisement, and advertisement will show ads to the Indian company in South Asian region. Okay, it will not show ads to the to the South Asian region, including India. Okay, now should India company withhold tax one on the entire amount or not? That is the question, because in this what is happening is that online advertisement across South Asia region will happen, including India. So whether only the India part he will have to do the equalization levy 1.0 or on the whole part. So here again in equalization 1.0, it is said the consideration that is being paid by the Indian company to the online advertisement company, on that full amount equalization levy has to be done. So that on full amount 6% equalization will be levied. And with equalization levy 2.0 coming on, now if suppose advertising company in foreign countries giving the advertisement to another foreign country for ads to be shown in India, that will also be covered under equalization levy 2.0. Yes, Pankaj sir.
Thanks, Ankit. I think this was very, very interesting. And just for our participants, the entire all this case study, everything was Ankit's brainchild, and the entire research was done by him. So that's why it was best that Ankit himself takes up this entire section. The message is loud and clear. There are enough and more than there. These are just some cases. There will be so many different cases, not only impacting the foreign company, but also impacting our Indian clients, or if you are from the corporate world, your company, if you are even if you are purely domestic, there are so many different interpretations. There are so many different pitfalls in this. The suggestion here is that please ensure that every possible aspect has been taken into account. You have the right consulting, or if you are a consultant, you take into account every possible. You tell your clients all the different risks before we take into account. Maybe if you are dealing with a foreign company, if you are an Indian person and you are dealing with a foreign company, how much ever the weight of the foreign company is, maybe you can agree upfront that in case something happens, how the tax will be divided, how will it be shared, some foolproof arrangements, so that ultimately we are not in trouble. So this is the takeaway from this discussion. So the next thing is the withholding tax, so which is essentially the TDS. Now this is just a differentiation here. This is purely India. So this is now somebody making a payment to India. Correct, Ankit?
Pankaj sir, this is on e-commerce operator. Now, in this e-commerce operator can be both non-resident and resident. It is mainly targeting the Amazon and Flipkarts of India, but they have widened it to include even the non-residents.
No, but this is for person. So it means see, let's see. I'll tell you. It is essentially a payment made for by an e-commerce operator to an Indian. That is the point. So the income earner here is India. The person withholding the tax can be resident or non-resident, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
so it
This
is for
is
the
the biggest
e-commerce
difference.
participant. So what was happening in India was that many small sellers who did not have shops and all, they were selling online. In order to bring them within the purview of tax, they introduced this section.
This is the point. So essentially, the difference between equalization levy and this TDS is equalization levy is where foreign company is earning income. This TDS is where Indian company is earning income. First, let's understand this first. This is the difference between these two. That is where here there is a TDS and there is a equalization levy. Here there is no question of credit, double taxation, none of that, because the income earner is Indian. So now let's go ahead. What it says is where the sale of goods of e-commerce participants are facilitated by an e-commerce operator, non-resident or resident, through which digital or electronic platform facility, such e-commerce operator is required to deduct. So let's go step by step. Where sale of e-commerce, where sale of goods of e-commerce participant. So say for example, there is a vendor in India, okay, say XYZ Limited. XYZ Limited is an Indian vendor, Indian company. That Indian company is selling goods through an Amazon. Again, Amazon is, I am just taking the name because it is a household name, everybody relates to it. It is a marketplace. So what we understand as an e-commerce operator. So it is a marketplace. There is a vendor XYZ Limited who is an Indian company. So now let's read. Sale of goods services of XYZ Limited, India, are facilitated by Amazon through its digital or electronic platform. Such e-commerce operator means Amazon will deduct TDS at the rate of 1%. Amazon has to deduct on the entire sale value which it pays to the vendor. This is one of the biggest things because till now sales were never taxed. This is the first time where a sale transaction is getting taxed. TCS is there on so tax collection is there. That's a separate issue on sale of transaction which has come. But this is a TDS on a sale transaction by a e-commerce operator which was never ever there. Sales was never captured. Now let's see. E-commerce operator means a person who owns, operates, manages digital platform for electronic commerce. Again, this is a very wide. Again, is it Amazon or is it your own? Nobody knows. But here it doesn't make a difference because if it is your own, then you are not going to make a payment. So essentially, even though it is not defined that way, the section itself is such that you will only look at a player who is a marketplace, like an Amazon or a Flipkart. E-commerce participant means a person resident in India. So it's an Indian company selling goods or services through digital e-commerce, whatever. So through Amazon. So there is an Indian company XYZ Limited who is selling goods through Amazon. Services includes whatever. For the purpose of this, e-commerce operator shall be deemed to be person responsible for paying to e-commerce participant. So there are specific provisions on TDS on what happens to a person responsible for paying. So essentially, he has to pay. If he doesn't pay, then he will be treated as assessing in default, etc., etc. So now e-commerce operators will be treated as assessing in default if TDS is not deducted. Tax is not deductible if the following are satisfied: if individual or HUF, if the gross amount of such sale through the operator does not exceed 5 lakhs. So this will be at the participant level. Such e-commerce participant has furnished PAN. So PAN has to be furnished, but I don't think that's a big issue because it's an Indian company, so there I no question about it. Lower TDS can be obtained. So essentially, if somebody doesn't want, somebody is saying, if the participant, so the Indian company is saying that I don't have cash flow, I'm going into losses, this 1% or retention is going to make a big difference to my cash flow, somebody may come and say, fine, don't deduct the TDS.
Pankaj sir, just before you end this 194.0,
Yeah, go
so
ahead.
if I can give one case for this audience to understand it better. So suppose AliExpress is an e-commerce operator in our in the example which I'm giving, and e-commerce participant is suppose a Bangalore-based trader who is selling Mysore sandal soap through the AliExpress Inc. So in this case, and now the purchaser can be anywhere, whether the purchaser is in Japan, China, India, Malaysia, anywhere over the world, it can be the purchaser. Now, when the purchaser buys the goods, AliExpress under 194.0 is liable to deduct TDS at 1% whether paying to e-commerce participant, that is a Bangalore trader or not. It can be happen that the buyer is directly paying to me, but yet AliExpress has the liability. Now, people often get confused that 194.0 and equalization levy 2.0 will both be liable on AliExpress or not. But there are two different income on which these two taxes are being covered. 194.0 is in the income of e-commerce participant, and equalization levy 2.0 is in the income of the e-commerce operator. So that's why there is no overlapping between the two.
Very, very good point as what Ankit mentioned. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's move on. So now, I will touch upon it. There is a lot of English, lot of verbiage on this side. Ankit has done a lot of hard work on this, but I will just take it out in 2 sentences, just in the interest of time. I've mentioned time and again in the earlier slides that many countries have unilaterally introduced measures to address this digital economy, digital taxation leakage. And there will be double taxation, there will be conflicts between countries as to whether something is acceptable, not acceptable. And we said that since equalization levy is part of the digital economy itself, as a BEPS where everybody had come together, levy of a equalization levy ought not to be challenged. Unfortunately, US has come back and said that what you are doing is unfair to US companies. It is discriminatory, it is unreasonable, inconsistent with international principle, burdensome, restricts US commerce, etc., etc. And they have said that this should be scrapped. And we have told them that number one, it is part of the BEPS action plan, which you only have agreed on. Number two, we are not discriminating. We are doing it for every country. It is not for US. US is saying you are not doing it for Indian companies, but this is not for India. There is no tax leakage between India to India. The problem is there is tax leakage when India is paying to foreign country. So where is the question of levying equalization levy on Indian companies? So US has come up with, in what I have read that thing, I think, I don't know what, maybe their companies are putting pressure on the political system and they have to take it up and all of that. But India has given a fitting reply saying that this is something which is already part of an internationally accepted principle. So you please do not now come and start challenging us. So this is happening, but I don't think anything is going to happen. If you see, we had seen in UK, we had seen in Italy, exactly same provisions are there in UK as well as Italy for what India has done. So it is not that India has done anything different from other countries, nor India is charging US something different from other countries. So there is no discrimination. Okay, the second, now I am cognizant of time. We are 7:40. We are 20 minutes, of which we need to leave some time for Q&A as well. So I will, and we have covered the crux part of it. This is the only last main part which we need to focus on. Otherwise, I think we've covered everything. So I will now go up to 10 minutes to 7:50, and then we will keep 10 minutes for Q&A, unless Shetty sir and organizers allow us maybe a few more minutes here or there. This is where this is my plan. Okay. So we have 20 minutes. Let's do a good job. So significant economic presence, we mentioned that that if somebody has a website here and there is a connection, regardless of suffragette equalization levy, there is no physical presence, and yet I want to tax. I want to show a nexus between in business and what is done in India, and to show that business has been done in India virtually or through digital means. How do I establish it? There is a concept of significant economic presence, which is one of the measures mentioned in the BEPS Action Plan 1, what we already saw. What India has done, India has said that significant economic presence will now create business connection in a nutshell. I'm not reading the whole thing. But now this is part of the Income Tax Act. Because it is part of the Income Tax Act, the DTA will override this. So whatever India does in the act unilaterally is meaningless until there is a change in the DTAs, which India has entered into with various countries. That change has not come to bring in the concept of significant economic presence. Until that happens, this is just theoretical. But it is there as a part of the act, so it is best to just know what it is. But as of now, it is not effective. Yes, if there is a country where DTA is not there, then this is directly applicable and it is effective. So we need to look at it. What does significant as per our Income Tax Act say? A transaction in respect of goods, service or property carried out by non-resident. Aggregate amount of such payment exceed a threshold of 2 crores. If you sell goods more than 2 crores in India, the business connection is there. That's it. No questions asked. A transaction involving provision of download of data or software. So download of data or software, the aggregate payment is 2 crores. If any download of data in India and the aggregate payment is more than 2 crores, deemed business connection in India. Now the third, now this is as ambiguous as it can get. A systematic and continuous soliciting of business activities or engaging in interaction. Systematic and continuous soliciting of business activities. I frankly don't understand what it means. It's basically that somebody is coming into India and seeking business or engaging in interaction with number of users. So I am interacting. So somebody pays me to interact with users. So it is as if one US company has paid another US company to interact with Indian users. Bus, that's it. How many? 3 lakh users. If you do 3 lakh users in a year, more than that, your economic presence in India digitally is significant. That's it. You're done. It will be business connection in India. Now, what is attributable to that is a different story. There again, there will be the discussion how much work happens in India, how much work happens outside India, what percentage of profit is in India, is it 30%, 20%? That is going to be another huge fight. But right now, we are on the concept itself. Attribution, we have not even reached that stage. Then we have just made some amendment to say whether the agreement is entered into India or not, whether non-resident has residence or place in India or not, whether non-resident renders service in India or not. This is just out of abundant caution, it's clear. I think it's broadly there, everything is there. This is just, again, more abundant clarifications are there. Okay, now I will just touch upon this, I will not elaborate on it. This is the latest BEPS has issued a report which says pillar 1, pillar 2. Just so everybody should know, because there will be a lot of jargon which has been spelled out. What is this? There is pillar 1, pillar. What is this pillar 1, pillar 2? There are no pillars. It is a simple concept. And again, if you ask me, it is exactly the same as what was already mentioned. It is just different English. Now, this is my understanding. I'm sure the OECD will start shooting me if I say that what you've done earlier is the same what you've done now. But that is how I am reading it. It's the same. What is pillar one? What is pillar one? New. Okay, let's go up on the second bullet. Pillar one focuses on defining nexus rule and allocating share of profit. This is what we discussed in significant economic presence. Or your equalization levy, same thing. Pillar 2 focuses on global minimum tax to address base erosion. Now, this again is either equalization levy or is a new concept which is global minimum tax, which I will touch upon. So let's go to pillar 1. New taxing rights for market jurisdiction over a share of residual profit of a multinational or segment. So basically what we are saying is that earlier everybody has a right on what exactly was done in a particular jurisdiction. Now we are saying that can you share some residual profit? Residual profit means that okay, India has done an X activity, you pay arm's length compensation. After that arm's length compensation, which you are looking at, but the overall organization has made significant profit. So some portion of that profit also should be brought into India depending on what activity they've done. So say for example, today India has done some marketing activity and they have done significant work. Now because of this marketing activity, India is paid the cost plus 15%. I'm just giving an example. Or India has allocated some commission or whatever. But because say India's role in the whole thing, India is selling the goods. Selling is an important aspect of doing business. Suppose somebody says that selling and marketing is 35%, say Rolls-Royce. Rolls-Royce judgment, High Court, Delhi High Court judgment says selling and marketing is 35% of the activity. Okay. So somebody will say that for the commission, for the actual work, I have paid arm's length commission. But on an overall basis, 35% of work has been done by India. So whatever is the overall profit, from there, 35% should be allocated to India. Now that is again, I would believe it goes back to the concept of significant economic presence. Otherwise, you cannot artificially allocate to India unless there is a compelling reason. So I would believe only if there is a significant economic presence value add, then only you can go to residual. A fixed return, then the second bullet, a fixed return for certain baseline marketing and distribution activity taking place physically in a market jurisdiction. So again, I would believe this is broadly, again goes back to either significant economic presence or equalization level. Process to improve tax certainty in effective dispute prevention. That's fine. Now, pillar 2, to ensure large MNCs pay at least minimum tax, regardless of jurisdiction where profits are earned. So again, where artificially where you earn profits, where some activity is done where you pay cost plus or you don't pay anything, everybody will do 15%. It aims for developing a tax structure which is relevant for a digital and globalized world. It is part of the inclusive framework of this. This is fair enough. I think broadly we've discussed, it is what it is. So they are trying to have a minimum tax. We don't have any answer. Just do 15% minimum tax, everything will be taken. This is essentially what it means to me. So this is what it is. I will not get into the details of it. It is essentially what we just discussed, that there is an issue. We have discussed the issue at length. The international community has come together and has come out with some measures. India has also implemented some measures unilaterally. However, there are still discussions ongoing as to how to achieve what we really want to achieve is fairness. And nobody has the answer to it as to what is fair. People are grappling with it. But I'm sure that something or the other is going to come out. Whether fair or not in your mind, it is going to come out. But even today, there are measures in India. If you are a foreign company, obviously you need to look at it. even if you have no international operations and you are a domestic, but you have dealings with international companies, you need to be aware of all of this, because ultimately it may come back to you either by way of assessing in default for TDS, or by way of your own being a representative assessee, or in an equalization levy one situation for non-compliance. So anything you do, you need to be aware of it. So I will stop here. Thank you so much for a patient hearing. The chat box.
There is a question there in Q&A.
Yes, I saw. Yes, so yes, both 6% and 2% levies are applicable, but they are in completely different cases as we discussed. One is for a foreign company who is having ad revenue. Other is where there is any two companies who has a particular kind of ad and is focusing in India. Only that will be taxed. But if you are, see, there is an exception. If you are under one, then you will not be under two. So there is a specific exception mentioned in the section itself. There are any other questions, please do mention in the chat window. Otherwise, I guess then we will close. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes in case anybody has any additional questions.
Yeah, participants, please post your queries. As of now, no other query.
So, sir, up to you. I will leave it to you now when you want to close the session.
Yeah, otherwise I think we are done with. So we had a fabulous session. You answered all the issues regarding equalization levy, TDS, and international taxation issues on particularly the digital transactions. I think all of us enriched from the session. Thank you very much, C.S. Sangvi and Ankit Jain. Both of you did fantastic job. Excellent sessions we had. Thank you very much. On behalf of Bangalore branch and on behalf of all the participants here, our wholehearted thanks to both of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a patient hearing and the opportunity to address the audience. And let's hope we get a chance to talk again.
Thank you. Participants, you are the reason your active participation made this program a successful one. Thank you very much. Tomorrow's program, as I already mentioned, internal audit and mythology. Please register for that program. Day after tomorrow, 2 days workshop on women's conference. And on 29th, 28th and 30th and 1st, 3 days workshop on valuation standards. I request please visit bangaloreici.org regularly so that you come to know all the programs which are interesting to you. Please register for that. With that note, once again, thank you very much to each one of you. Okay, good night. Thank you. See you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye. Have a great day.